Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much, Peter, for inviting me along today, and thank you for this morning's presentations. It's been very, very interesting. So this afternoon, I suppose what I would like to present to you is a case study of professional competence and the assessment of professional competence in a program of initial teacher education. So in preparing the slides today, I was mindful that, and we talked about it this morning, that professional programs are often easier maybe to assess because you have the regulatory body and the conditions that they sometimes put in place. So I suppose I really wanted to draw out the wider kind of learnings and hopefully share, and you can really, I suppose, use some of these in other programs as well. So just in terms of the structure of what I'd like to discuss is just, I suppose, to reflect on our understandings of what competence is in a professional work setting, to examine the various modes of assessment, to look at COVID and what it has posed for us, because it certainly has posed challenges for those of us who have been, using and used to working in the placement setting, where now we have restrictions and we've had to modify, we've had to re-envision, we've had to reimagine our assessments. And some of it, I think, has been very exciting. And I know those of us in teacher education may well keep some of what we've learned in that. So I'd like to share those with you as well. And finally, I suppose we've talked a lot about it this morning as well, is to look at a reflective practice as a tool for the development of self-efficacy and professional agency. I suppose that's really what we're about in professional programs, is graduating professional reflexive thinkers, people who have, problem solve, can communicate, can share their learned experiences, and who can adapt and be reflective. And I suppose I think reflective practice can enhance and support the assessment of professional competence. So just looking at a way of defining it and what it means to us. I think when we talk about professional competence, we're looking at two sets of capacities. We're looking at the knowledge and the skills that you need to do the job, but we're also looking then at the values and the dispositions. And it's when they come together that we really, I suppose, have a sense of somebody's professional capacity, somebody's ability to meet the demands of the profession. And really, I suppose professional competence is very much aligned to your professional identity. And that's what we're trying to do all the time. From the minute a student comes on a professional program, we're trying to ensure that we grow and develop and sustain and nurture a professional identity, because identity, and I've done quite a lot of study on this, it really, I suppose, it stands as who we are, how we operate, what we understand our work to be. And it really is a certain kind of person in a certain kind of context. And it really defines, I suppose, identity defines where a person puts their effort, how they seek out professional development opportunities, and how they're going to grow in the future. Because I think we have to be mindful always that these are, they're on a continuum, they're on a journey. And while we graduate the best we can, we also have to be mindful that we want these people to grow and sustain their growth. So we have to ensure that they bring with them that lifelong capacity to learn and develop and want to grow and become insightful practitioners who really can learn from the experiences they have. So it's important, I suppose, on a professional program then, that we really provide those authentic learning opportunities. And we spoke a lot about that this morning. What does that mean? Professional identity doesn't happen in isolation. We're all part of a social world, and we need to have those professional conversations with others. We need to grow. Our identity is not stable. It's not fixed. Just because I'm a teacher of this at this particular moment, that doesn't mean that the classroom will change, that policies will change. I have to be responsive. I have to be reflexive. I have to be able to grow and develop. And we need to, I suppose, bring students with us on that journey. We also talked, I suppose, this morning a lot about what students value on placements. And sometimes they go into a placement and what they've learned in the college or what they've learned on their academic program, it doesn't align with the experiences. And we're very mindful of that in teacher education particularly. And I suppose Zeichner talked about how students' experiences are often washed out in the real world of the classroom. And a classroom is a complex place, no more than any professional setting. And students will come across challenges and things that they haven't learned in their academic program. But what we're trying to do all the time is to align the theory and the practice, to give them the knowledge, to give them the pedagogy, to give them the experiences so that they can use them in their situations. And we don't want, I suppose, technicians. That's what we don't. We don't want people who just do the same thing. We want to have people who can reflect, who can research if something goes wrong, who can adapt, who can draw on different skills and different knowledge. And that's really important from the program point of view and from the design of any program, that when you're thinking about the professional placement, it's not an isolated module. It is a growth and a journey, and you design the modules to bring and sustain the student to that place. So I suppose, as I said, in the professional context, we're always balancing the needs of the professional and the academic accreditation. And while it may kind of, I suppose, look sometimes like a luxury to have guidelines, to have criteria, to have it all set down, it also is problematic in that it's high stakes for the student then. So if I take our own program, 40 of the 120 credits are given and assessed on placement. So that's really high stakes. And we know sometimes then when they go out looking for jobs, that's the piece that maybe the employer looks to. How have they performed in the placement settings? So it's not always, I suppose, as easy as it looks, because it puts a lot of pressure on students then to perform in the workplace, and maybe they don't get those experiences that we'd love to have, those experiential ones where they can learn and develop, because they are being assessed and they're under pressure to do very, very well, and they put themselves under a lot of pressure. So we really have to be mindful of that, I suppose, again, when we are preparing them and when we're out there assessing them. And I'll talk a little bit about that as we go on as well. So looking at a robust assessment program, how do we design that? Well, I suppose the one thing that I would say is that the learning outcomes must permeate all of the modules of the program, that it really is an integrated experience, that the work placement, the school placement in our context, is across all modules, that we're building and we're growing, and we're continuously talking to students about that identity, about what will happen when they're out. We also, I suppose, have to ensure that our assessment tools are fit for purpose as well. And I'll talk in respect of how we do that, and that the tasks are authentic. We work with postgraduate students, and we all know that they're very much, I suppose, highly motivated. They know that there's a job at the end of it. They know that what they're going to be doing. And so they really want the tasks to be authentic in order to buy into it and in order to, to really, I suppose, experience it. But we have to be mindful, I suppose, as academic program designers here, that that they don't just get as I said, the technical apprenticeship bit, that they get the wider understandings, that they get the theory, that they don't just have the application and the knowledge in that respect. So if we look at the professional attributes of a teacher, and these could be applied across any profession, there's quite a lot there that you're actually trying to develop within one individual on a 2-year program, but also when you go out on placement and when you're out assessing students, how do you assess all of that in a meaningful way that is, that you can really stand over? And I think that consistency is absolutely crucial. And we spend a lot of time training our tutors, talking to our tutors. We would have perhaps maybe in 1 year, we would have 5 different training sessions with our tutors to ensure that consistency. We're continuously talking and developing communities of practice. We're moderating, we're float visiting, we're constantly checking to ensure that those are the real, I suppose, experiences, that students are all getting the same experience and the same consistent approach to it. If we look at placement itself, then what are we trying to do? Well, I suppose, in any program, as I said, there's the knowledge, the skills, the competencies, the professional disposition, and that piece around personal identity too. So how do you manage to assess all of the things that you need, this person needs to do in order to do the job, but then you're also trying to give them the opportunity to develop personally. And, I suppose placement has been an integral part of the teaching profession for a long time. I remember back to being a 17-year-old out in a school in Portmarnock, and that's a long time ago. So we have been doing it. So, but how do you, I suppose now, where classrooms have become more complex, I think, and there's more diversity around, how do you allow a student to develop that personal identity and that personal growth? And I think that that's very, very important, because we want to retain, retention in a profession is very, very important too. I think it's really important to foster open dialogue too, and to acknowledge the huge role that those who are out in the workplace assessment or workplace learning environment have to support the student, other teachers, other principals, other people working in schools, and whatever other settings, that they really, the chats are not the chats, they're professional conversations. And how do we value those professional conversations when a student turns to somebody and said, how might I have done that differently? Could I have done that? What happened with Mary? Why did she not learn that? That's really open dialogue that we need to value, and we need to, I suppose, recognize as how much it can contribute to somebody's learning. And I suppose, that relationship between the student teacher, the HEI, and the school, that partnership is absolutely crucial. And it helps, I suppose, a collaborative sense. And we're always looking for ways of collaborating with schools, of working with schools, and working with the professionals in those environments to support the journey of the student. So I suppose I've just done some studies myself, and I asked our students just to rate, of all the modules that they study on the programme, and there are 12 different modules, to rate what they felt was the most valuable module. And this was their number one. And we're not surprised, are we? They love the placement. They love being out, because that's the job they came on. That's what they wanted to do. But I think it's really important to look at the words that they use. It was the real life experience, the practical, the insight, the theory, the realistic. It was what it was invaluable to them. It was beneficial. So we know that they like it. And I suppose then it behoves us all to design it in a way that really, really supports that, because it is important to them and we're listening to their voices. So when we talk about, and we talked this morning about, I suppose, the pedagogy, the preparation in Hibernia College, this is how we prepare our student teachers, and we treat it like any other module that is really systematically designed to ensure that the student meets the learning outcomes and that they have success, and they know what the criteria around that is. So we live in a blended world, and we would have on-demand sessions which are released and studied. We would have webinars and tutorials. We have online moderated discussion forums, and I suppose the school placement forums are probably the most used forums we would ever have. Students really, really need support before they go on placement. And these forums are run before they ever go out on placement, so that they have some support and they have some of their questions and some of their needs answered. We have face-to-face days with them then, where we meet them in the face-to-face world. We have micro-teaching, and I think this is kind of a, something that often was looked down on in teaching, but where you have simulated practice, where you set up a situation where students get to practice what it is to be a teacher. And many of them are coming to us, they haven't stood in the classroom, they haven't maybe experienced even of communicating, and teaching is all about communication. So we give them an opportunity in a safe environment to practice with their peers, to get feedback from their peers, and to get feedback from a tutor, and to really, I suppose, get some sense of what it's like, even just to physically stand up and to have to deliver it. So that has proved really beneficial. And we often combine that then with our tutorials, so that we can reflect back on them and what would they change and what would they do. And we do something as simple as 2 stars and a wish in terms of the student feedback. What did you like about it? What would you recommend? And then I suppose the placement itself, they're usually 6-week periods, and then there's one block which is 10 weeks, and the students are out in that. We also have, I suppose, on our virtual learning environment, a really dedicated portal for school placement. We call it our school placement hub. And that's where we put everything. So our handbooks, our guidelines, our assessments, or any documentation that the student needs in relation to so that they have a repository, a place to go that they absolutely know has all of the information. And I suppose we put up resources, we put up FAQs, we up all the templates. If we have notices that we need to send, we communicate through our school placement hub very efficiently with the students and with our tutors across all of our modules, so that everybody is clear what the expectations are and where they can go to look for them. We link in then with all of our, our NCCA, any curriculum, any support documents, any of the work, I suppose, that we would feel students might benefit. We put all of that up in terms of resources. And again, it's really helpful for a student teacher to be able to go on and get it at the touch of a button and have everything in a safe place. Then I suppose it's having those very definite assessment criteria. So a student knows exactly what they're going to be assessed on. And they're I suppose, the rubric that we use, and their professionalism, their planning, their preparation, because that's really important in an environment where they're going to have to be continuously. So we value that, and we assess that, and we mark that. Obviously, the quality of what they do out on the placement. And I suppose maybe one to look at is their ability to reflect, but not just to reflect, it's to adapt. So after each lesson, they actually have to say, what would they do differently? And they write that down for us. So it's not just the loose sense of tell us what you thought about the lesson. It's actually, I suppose, prodding them a little bit more to say, well, how would I have done it differently? And that really makes them think about their resources or their approach or their methods or whatever they use within the classroom that will allow them, I suppose, to grow. And that's where the personal growth can really come on and can really be seen. And you'd see that in the difference between, a student who is simply describing a lesson as somebody who's interrogated their practice and actually knows how to develop it. So we use a range of different assessment methods. Portfolios are wonderful, for students to actually showcase their resources, their lessons, their artifacts that they've done within the classroom, photographs, videos, really important for them to have a repository, a safe place to say, well, look, this has been my 10 weeks here, and look at it. It's not just the visit that you came on, it's a total look across my 10 weeks and how I've developed. I'll leave the tutor visits for just one moment. We use a lot of reflective learning and reflective logs, reflective commentaries where we guide them, and we might put up an article or we might put up suggested that they look at something and then they reflect on that, so that we're really, I suppose, develop them. We talk a lot about reflective practice, but we actually have to teach students how to reflect. It's not something I think that's necessarily intuitive. And we use multimedia audio presentations as well, where we ask them to design things, artifacts and resources that they're going to use in the digital world in the classrooms, and they have to present those. So we use a wide range of assessment methods. And if you think about it, if we just kept the assessment of 40 credits to just visits, it would be very, very stressful for students. So we like to kind of, I suppose, spread and have different modes of assessment so that they can show us in various ways how they have developed. In terms of the actual visits, and I'll talk to you a little bit about that. So before any student goes out, we have what's called a virtual visit. So we go online, they upload maybe a lesson plan or resource, and they get feedback on it before they're ever out in a room. So I suppose we're staging it. We have a supportive, and this is non-graded feedback, where we sort of say, well, look, you might want to look at this, you could look at this. We then go out and we have our face-to-face observation visits. And we always use two tutors assessing, so that no one student is just seeing one person. And we have, after the supervisor has seen the lesson, they then meet with the student immediately after that. They sit with the student and they have a very reflective discussion. And I suppose it's that, dialogue framed by the theory of action is how I would put it, that it's a real mentoring, coaching, balance between assessor and the coach and the pastoral side. And it works very, very well, where somebody is in situ at a moment in time, able to reflect and able to discuss and able to have a real conversation with the student as to where they look. They get written feedback. And what we've introduced very recently, which we have found is very powerful, is we ask the student to respond to the written feedback. So when the tutor posts the written feedback on the VLE, the student then has to respond and say, well, what are the two things that they, would agree with, or what would they might do different? Because sometimes we found that in that post feedback, the student is so maybe nervous, stressed, feeling a little bit anxious, or feeling, oh my God, I've just had a visit, absolutely, that they don't always take everything in as you might expect them to. So we have that process where, and they can also then ask the tutor, well, what do you mean by that piece of feedback? I'm really not sure. I know you talked to me about it. So it doesn't end with the conversation, and it doesn't end with the grade. And I suppose that's just a look at our form. So we have the strengths of the student teacher, and then the aspects for the improvement for the student teacher. And the visit is either satisfactory or unsatisfactory. And if the student has an unsatisfactory visit, then we send out a mentor. So again, a non-graded visit where somebody goes in and just supports the student through the process again, and gives them, I suppose, the confidence to go again and to pick it up again, and to work really hard at improving it. So there's a real, I suppose, balance between the assessment and being supportive and growing somebody, because we all know, as a teacher yourself, or as somebody, things can go wrong, lessons can go, but it's how I adapt, it's how I react, it's how I reflect on it, and what I do differently the next time that can actually make me even a better person, a better teacher. So we're really trying, as I said, to develop the student for the long-term career, not just for those isolated assess visits that become too high stakes for them. I think there are different ways, and I talked about, different ways of having those conversations. And what you're trying to do, I suppose, is to co-construct knowledge with the student the whole time. And there are different frameworks that we use. Sometimes we use Bloom's taxonomy, simply remember, what did I do? Did I meet my objectives? And then to that higher level, synthesis, analysis, evaluation, what am I going to do different? We also use Gibbs' reflective cycle, and I suppose that's the piece I talked about, of actually modeling for students of what reflection looks like, so that they can really interrogate their own practice. And over the course of the program, the 2-year program, we build these up in terms of levels. We don't go out on the first block expecting that students can do all of this, but by the time they come to their final module, which we call our advanced model, we would expect that the reflective student can do this in a meaningful way, and can engage with these processes, having been taught, having been supported, having been mentored through the process over the 2 years. And I think that's really the success of any workplace environment, is that having pastoral support. So our student support officer, we have a school placement coordinator, we have a head of school placement. Like, we invest a lot of resources in the supports that we offer students, so that they have contacts and people to instantly call, so they can call anybody, their own tutor as well, and have that pastoral support. The mentoring and coaching, and as I said, we invest a lot of time in the training and coaching and mentoring of our mentors and coaches, of our school placement tutors is what we call them, so that they are able for the role, and that they're able to support our students. A lot of time, I suppose, in that structured dialogue, that observation, that becomes a real experience out in the school, and that there is that co-construction, that development towards understanding what has actually happened, and the reflective practice. And I think they are the elements of what we have learned over the last 20 years, that when they're in place, the students can feel supported, and they can grow, and they can develop. And as I said, we've had, I suppose, very much a face-to-face, school-based setting, and now we're finding ourselves in a different situation. We had students who we had to graduate who only got 3 of their 10 weeks placement last year. So we had to come up with very, sophisticated alternative assessments. And I think what we have done is we have developed our reflective discussions. They're now all online on Zoom, so that the student teachers were able to talk through the lessons that they had developed, the resources that they had developed in those 3 weeks, and we were able to assess them in the same way in those reflective discussions. We developed communities of practice with students as well. So each week we put up a question and we asked students to respond to, to give 4 or 5 different forum posts to that as well. And they got written feedback on it. So we've all had to develop. And I suppose the thing that the situation that we're now in is that we have students who are out on placement, but unfortunately the school placement tutors can't visit the placements because schools are obviously not accepting visitors at the moment. So we now have a scenario where students have all of their lessons uploaded online, and the tutors are going in and having reflective discussions with the student on Zoom, teasing through how they taught it, how they used it, what the classroom management, what happened in this child, all those kind of questions that you'd have in that post reflection are all happening online as well. And that's been, challenging for us to train our tutors up, and also to ensure that the technology works and everything. But I think we've learned an awful lot in terms of how powerful those reflective discussions can be if they are teased out correctly, and if there's guidance, and if they're, people are working through them. And I suppose, finally, I suppose just kind of things to consider, quality learning occurs when there are diverse opportunities with appropriate mentoring, feedback, and dialogue. And that's certainly our experience of what we have discovered. Assessors need to be carefully selected, trained, and clear expectations on all sides. The importance of building effective partnership with HEIs and workplace. So our cooperative teachers who are out in our schools don't assess our students, but they're always asked by the school placement tutor how the student is getting on. We always seek their opinion. We always seek their professional judgment. They don't play a role in the actual formal assessment, but they certainly, are a key partner in the whole process. And I suppose what we've learned is that assessment practices can ideally exploit the capacity of technology to promote it. The technology hasn't stopped us. In fact, in some ways, it often enhances it, because you have a direct connection and you have instant access sometimes to tutors that you may have. So it's to look at how the technology can grow that, but I suppose also help you simply to manage the placement setting as well. But I suppose of all the things, I would think it's that ongoing review and evaluation, drawing on the range of perspectives, helping to ensure that it's a quality learning experience. That's really crucial. The surveying of students, the surveying of our tutors, the surveying of schools and principals, really ensuring that we are, adapting, that we as a HEI are adapting to what is happening on the ground as well, and what students are telling us. So hopefully that's just given you some sense of a practical way in how you can assess the placements in one particular context. So thank you very much.